They say the truth always wins, but in a courtroom built on power, influence, and corruption, truth is often the first casualty. When Billionaire CEO Alexander Reed was accused of orchestrating one of the biggest corporate frauds in state history, the world celebrated his downfall. Reporters called him a monster. Former allies called him guilty. And his own attorney, the man paid to protect him, walked out in the middle of trial, leaving him seconds from losing everything. His freedom. His legacy. His life. And just when defeat seemed certain, a voice rose from the back of the courtroom. Not a lawyer. Not a judge. Not a wealthy benefactor. A woman in a simple uniform holding a tray of paper cups. Maya Lawson, a black maid no one ever bothered to notice, stepped forward and declared, "I will defend him." The courtroom erupted in laughter. The cameras rolled. The world doubted her. But they didn't know what was coming. They didn't know this quiet woman carried a fire powerful enough to challenge giants. They didn't know she had listened, observed, and uncovered the truth hidden beneath lies. They didn't know she was about to become the greatest weapon Alexander Reed could ever have. So before you judge her, ask yourself, is courage measured by education, or by the willingness to stand when everyone else runs? Stay with this story till the end and decide for yourself. Is Maya Lawson a fool, or the most extraordinary defender justice has ever seen? Rain hammered the courthouse steps long before dawn, turning the stone stairway into a river that flowed downward onto the street where camera crews and reporters waited like wolves that smelled blood. Sirens wailed in the distance, merging with the rumbling thunder. The city felt tense, as if the storm was not just in the clouds, but inside every waiting heart. And at the center of it all, towering over the chaos like a monument about to crack, stood the towering facade of the state Supreme Court, a place carved from cold marble and colder justice. Inside Courtroom 14, people gathered early. They filled the seats long before the session began, journalists with laptops ready, law students scribbling predictions, retired judges eager for drama, and businessmen hoping to witness the fall of a legend. The air was sharp with whispers and tension. Every eye watched the door at the front of the courtroom, waiting for the man whose story had shaken the nation. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff called for order. The crowd quieted in an instant as two guards appeared, escorting Alexander Reed to the defendant's table. The room went silent. Alexander looked nothing like the man the world once knew. Gone was the fearless visionary whose face had graced magazine covers with headlines like the architect of a new tomorrow and the genius who changed modern infrastructure. Gone was the powerful CEO whose innovations reshaped transportation, renewable energy, and housing. This Alexander was thinner, paler. His face was etched with sleepless nights and months of betrayal. His eyes, once bright blue like polished steel, now looked hollow, rimmed with red, haunted by the collapse of everything he spent 20 years building. His hands trembled slightly as he sat, and when he exhaled, it was the breath of a man carrying mountains. His suit still looked expensive, custom-tailored from charcoal wool and silk lining, but now it hung off his shoulders like the garment belonged to someone much stronger. People leaned forward, whispering, "He looks finished. He deserves it. He ruined lives. His fall is historic." But none of them knew the truth, not the truth Alexander lived, the truth that chewed through his bones and stole sleep from his nights. They only knew the headlines. Fraud. Embezzlement. Conspiracy. International laundering. Theft of billions. And now he sat alone, like a king stripped of crown and throne, waiting for his head to fall before the cheering crowd. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Marcus Kane leaned back confidently, hands folded, a smirk tugging his lips. He looked like a man who had already won. Behind him, stacks of organized files stood like a wall, evidence, testimony, financial analytics, witness statements, a fortress. He glanced at Alexander with a predator's satisfaction. Beside Alexander sat his attorney, Richard Halden, one of the most feared and expensive criminal defense lawyers in the country. A legend. A courtroom killer. A man who never lost cases. He wore a silver tie and a black suit so perfect it looked sculpted from shadow. His expression was unreadable, calm, calculating, dangerous. Alexander watched him with desperate hope. Halden was his last weapon. Halden was the only reason remaining investors believed Alexander might survive this trial. Halden was reputation. Halden was victory. Or so he thought. The judge entered, a stern woman with silver hair, sharp eyes, and no patience for theatrics. "This court is now in session," she declared. The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. She looked toward the defense. "Mr. Halden, you may begin your argument." All eyes turned toward the man expected to fire the first offensive shot that would reshape headlines and shake the courtroom foundation. Instead, Richard Halden slowly closed the leather folder in front of him. He placed his pen inside his briefcase. Then, with deliberate slow movements, like an executioner preparing a final blow, he stood. The room collectively inhaled. He stepped forward halfway between the tables, straightening his cuffs. "Your Honor, I formally withdraw representation of my client, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted, gasps, shouts, disbelief echoing like an explosion. Alexander whipped his head toward Halden, eyes wide, voice cracking. "What are you doing?" The judge banged her gavel. "Order." Silence. Halden did not look at Alexander. He kept his eyes forward, emotionless. "I can no longer represent Mr. Reed due to irreconcilable ethical conflicts. Continuing would compromise both my integrity and my professional standing." Alexander felt the floor tilt beneath him. "You said you believed me," he whispered. "You said we could win." Halden finally turned his head, eyes cold and sharp. "This case is unwinnable. The evidence is overwhelming. You are beyond saving, Mr. Reed. Consider this my final professional advice. Prepare yourself for sentencing." Alexander's breath stopped, like someone had wrapped fingers around his throat and squeezed. "You're abandoning me now? After everything?" Halden lifted his briefcase. "I am preserving my career." He stepped away from the table and walked toward the exit. Reporters scrambled like animals, rushing outside to break the headline before anyone else. Alexander stood abruptly, grabbing Halden's arm. "You promised. You swore you would fight for me." Halden jerked free with contempt. "And you swore you were innocent." "We both lied." The words sliced into Alexander like steel tearing through muscle. He watched the man walk out without looking back. He watched the doors close. He heard the click echo in his bones. It was the sound of finality. "The defense has withdrawn," the judge announced. "Mr. Reed, you will secure new representation by tomorrow morning, or the court will appoint counsel." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. The prosecution team laughed under their breath. Whispers surged across the gallery, loud enough for him to hear. "He's dead. Without Halden, he's finished. He'll never crawl out of this. He deserves prison." Flashbulbs sparked from reporters' phones, capturing humiliation frame by frame. Alexander lowered himself slowly into his seat, hands shaking violently. The world tunneled around him. His heart thundered so loudly he could barely hear anything else. His empire was gone. His company seized. His investors fled. The world spit on his name. Now he stood alone, broken, humiliated, hours away from losing his freedom forever. He felt his throat tighten, and for a moment he thought he might scream, or collapse, or beg, something he never imagined himself capable of. His breathing came fast and sharp. It felt like drowning. The courtroom emptied. Chairs scraped like bones against tile. Footsteps echoed all around. Reporters hurried out, eager to broadcast the collapse of a billionaire. Soon, only one person remained standing. Maya Lawson. She stood in the far back of the courtroom, wearing a navy uniform and holding a tray half filled with used paper cups and napkins. She had kept still through the entire collapse of Alexander Reed, her eyes fixed not with judgment or curiosity but with aching empathy. She had seen many trials, she worked in this courthouse every day. She had seen guilty men smirk and innocent men crumble. She had seen the powerful crush the powerless, and the powerless punished for daring to dream. But she had never seen anything like this, a titan destroyed not by proof, but by betrayal. She watched Alexander, and her heart twisted. Not out of pity, but recognition. The look in his eyes reminded her of the look in her mother's eyes when the hospital refused treatment because insurance wasn't processed. The look of someone screaming silently while the world watched and walked away. Everyone else avoided him like a disease. They hurried past, eager to distance themselves from a fallen giant. But Maya stepped forward. Slowly. Quietly. Without fear. She approached the defense table, placing the tray down softly. Her voice was gentle, barely above a whisper. "Sir, would you like some water?" Alexander looked up, startled by a voice that did not carry mockery or malice. His eyes met hers, and in them he saw no hatred, no accusation, no amusement, only humanity. "Yes," he managed, voice cracking. "Thank you." His hand shook as he took the cup. And then Maya did something no one else in that courtroom did. She didn't walk away. She didn't turn her back. She stood beside him. And she spoke with quiet strength. "You don't look like a guilty man." Alexander let out a broken laugh, not from humor, but disbelief that kindness still existed. "The world disagrees." "What do you believe?" Maya asked softly. He looked at her, searching, like a drowning man grabbing a hand reaching through the waves. "I believe I was set up," he said. "By someone powerful. Someone who knew exactly how to destroy me. And I can't prove it." Maya nodded slowly. "I believe you." Alexander blinked hard, struggling to steady his breath. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you believe a stranger?" She held his gaze, unwavering, fearless. "Because I watch people. It's what invisible people do. I've seen guilt. It looks different. Guilty people are angry at the world. Guilty people blame everyone but themselves. But you look like a man being punished for telling the truth." A tear slid down Alexander's face, the kind no one else was allowed to see. Maya stepped closer. "You may feel alone. But you aren't. Not anymore." He stared at her, unable to speak. And something shifted, something the world didn't see, something quiet and powerful and world-changing. Hope returned. It was small, fragile, flickering like the flame of a candle in a storm. But it was alive. Because someone believed him. Because someone saw him. Because someone who had nothing chose to stand with him. And sometimes, that is all it takes to change destiny. The rain had slowed to a thin drizzle by the time Maya stepped out the side entrance of the courthouse, but the air still felt heavy, thick with tension and the aftertaste of a public execution. Reporters swarmed the front steps like vultures clawing at a carcass, shouting questions, pushing microphones forward, desperate for a soundbite that could crown the evening news. But Maya walked unnoticed down the empty side street, her clothes damp from the storm, her fingers gripping the strap of her worn canvas bag. The world never looked at people like her, courthouse maintenance staff, janitors, clerks who swept floors and emptied trash. People talked around her, not to her. She had learned to exist in silence, invisible in the spaces where justice was supposed to live. But today something cracked inside her. Something woke up. She couldn't get the image of Alexander Reed out of her mind, the way his eyes shattered when his own lawyer abandoned him. The way everyone turned from him like he carried a plague. The way the system devoured him without hesitation. She had seen wealthy men fall before, but never like that, not with such quiet devastation, not with such naked sincerity. She kept seeing the moment he whispered, "You don't know what they took from me." And the truth was, she did know. She knew too well. Her apartment was small, barely a living room, a kitchenette, and a bedroom too narrow for anything bigger than a single bed. The wallpaper peeled at the edges and the fridge hummed loudly enough to drown silence, but it was home. A safe home, at least. Better than the one she grew up in. She switched on the kettle, removed her damp jacket, and stood in front of the window watching the streetlights blur through raindrops. On the wall opposite her bed hung a framed photograph, the only one she kept visible, of her mother in a hospital gown, smiling weakly, holding Maya's hand. The day the picture was taken was the last day her mother walked, the last day before the illness swallowed her strength. Maya remembered the night like a wound that never healed, the night the hospital requested emergency payment before treatment. They said it was policy. They said they were sorry. But they turned away anyway. Her mother died 3 days later, waiting for approval that never came. From that moment, Maya understood a brutal truth. Justice was not blind. It was expensive. And people like her, born without power, were always at the mercy of the system. So yes, she recognized the look in Alexander's eyes. The look of someone betrayed by the world they trusted. Somewhere across the city, Alexander Reed sat alone in the back of a black SUV, hands clasped tightly in his lap. His driver, Isaac, a quiet middle-aged man who had worked for him for years, watched him through the rearview mirror, concern hidden behind professionalism. "Where to, sir?" Isaac asked softly. Alexander stared forward blankly, his voice distant. "Just drive." In the last 6 months, Alexander had watched his empire burn. He had built Novacor, one of the most powerful infrastructure companies in the world, a company that revolutionized electric transit, smart cities, and sustainable construction. He gave thousands of people jobs, gave governments solutions, gave the world innovation. And then everything collapsed. It began with whispers, anonymous accusations, leaked documents, hidden financial records showing billions missing from global accounts. Then came warrants, FBI raids, seizures, asset freezes, and finally, the devastating indictment. Everyone turned against him overnight, officials who once begged for projects, investors who praised him, partners who celebrated his genius. Including the one person he trusted most. He closed his eyes, feeling the familiar stab of betrayal. Ethan Ward. His protégé. His best friend. The man he treated like a brother. Ethan had been the chief financial officer, the one person with access to every transaction, every contract, every confidential system. Ethan had convinced Alexander to authorize certain transfers under the guise of infrastructure expansion. Transfers he now realized had been carefully designed traps, each one leading directly back to him. Ethan had disappeared days before the federal investigation began. And when the evidence surfaced, all fingers pointed at Alexander. Now he was facing 120 years in prison. He opened his eyes, staring through the rain-glazed window at the city skyline. "I didn't steal from anyone," he whispered to no one. "I built this city. I gave everything." But he knew truth meant nothing without proof. And proof was buried deep, maybe gone forever. The next morning, Maya walked into the courthouse early, before sunrise, before the corridors filled, before the machinery of justice woke from its restless sleep. The janitor's hallway smelled faintly of cleaning solvent and old paper. Maya tapped her ID card to enter the staff office, dropped her bag on the chair, and opened her locker. Inside was a notebook, small, leather-bound, edges faded. It wasn't for poetry or dreams. It was for details. Observations. Conversations overheard. Names. Times. Patterns. Invisible people see everything. She had spent years listening to attorneys spill secrets while she wiped tables. She heard judges complain about political pressure. She heard prosecutors brag about bending rules to get convictions. She learned the system not from law school textbooks but from the mouths of the powerful when they forgot she existed. And yesterday, she heard whispers outside Courtroom 14, hurried, low, dangerous. She remembered it clearly. 2 well-dressed men in tailored suits, standing near the stairwell. "We need Reed's conviction locked before the investor deal closes. Don't worry. Without Halden, he has nobody. The story is already written. Good. By the time anyone notices, we'll be untouchable. That wasn't justice. That was strategy. A coordinated takedown. And someone wanted Alexander destroyed fast. She pulled out her notebook and wrote 3 words. There's a conspiracy. Her pulse quickened. She knew she was stepping into danger, the kind that could bury her career, her life, her safety. People who manipulate the justice system do not forgive interference. But something inside her refused to stay silent. She had watched one life slip through her fingers before. She wasn't going to watch another die without a fight. By 9 a.m., the courthouse was buzzing again, cameras, lawyers, guards, whispers. Alexander arrived with security, looking even more exhausted than the day before. The media screamed his name as he walked, billionaire fraudster. Thief of nations. Monster. But when he entered courtroom 14, his eyes immediately found Maya seated in the back row. And for a moment, only a moment, his breath steadied. Not because she could save him, but because she didn't look away. The judge entered. The bailiff called order. Proceedings resumed. Mr. Reed, the judge said, you have until tomorrow to secure representation. Alexander rose slowly. Your Honor, he began, voice strained, I need more time. The prosecutor cut him off. The defense has had months. We will not allow delays. The state requests immediate appointment of counsel if none is present today. Marcus Kane smirked, confident in victory. But then, something happened no one expected. Maya stood. The room froze. Invisible people were not supposed to stand. Invisible people were not supposed to speak. Your Honor, Maya called, her voice steady and clear, echoing across the room, may I speak? The judge blinked, startled. Miss Lawson, is it? You work in courthouse maintenance. Is there a reason for this interruption? Yes, Maya said, stepping forward. I request to address the court as a witness. A witness to what? The prosecutor scoffed. To corruption, Maya answered, eyes locked on his. And to evidence that this case is being manipulated. Gasps filled the courtroom. Alexander stared at her in disbelief, hope flickering like a flame catching wind. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. Miss Lawson, this is highly irregular. So is destroying an innocent man's life, Maya replied. And for the first time since the trial began, the power on the battlefield shifted. Just slightly. Just enough to be felt. The judge hesitated. Approached the bench. Maya walked to the front, spine straight, eyes fearless. As she passed Alexander, she whispered only 3 words, words that struck like lightning. I can help you. Alexander closed his eyes. And breathed. Not like a defeated man. But like a man reborn. The judge's chambers were colder than the courtroom, smaller, tighter, stripped of the public spectacle. The air inside felt different, heavier, as though the walls themselves had absorbed years of secrets whispered between desperate attorneys and exhausted judges. The oak door clicked shut behind Maya as she stepped inside, her palms damp but her spine straight. This was not a space designed for people like her. The room smelled of old coffee, polished wood, and authority, the kind of authority that could reshape destinies with a signature or a ruling. Judge Harrington removed her glasses and studied Maya with a measured, unreadable expression. Miss Lawson, she said calmly, you understand the seriousness of interrupting a federal trial without authorization? Yes, Your Honor, Maya replied. And you believe you have evidence relevant to Mr. Reed's defense? I do. The prosecutor, Marcus Kane, leaned forward with a smirk sharpened by arrogance. With all due respect, Your Honor, this is absurd. She's a maid. What could she possibly know about a multi-billion-dollar corporate case? Maya turned her gaze to him, steady, unflinching. I clean your offices, Mr. Kane. I empty your garbage cans. I wipe tables after your meetings. I hear everything you assume no one listens to. Kane's grin faltered. Judge Harrington raised a hand. Miss Lawson, you are making serious claims. Before I allow testimony, you must clarify one thing. What, exactly, do you know that affects this case? Maya took a breath so deep she felt her ribs tighten. 3 days before the indictment was filed, she began, I overheard 2 men speaking outside the stairwell near the north wing. One of them was Assistant Prosecutor Lowell. The other, I didn't see his face, but I recognized his voice. Recognized it from where? The judge asked. From the preliminary hearing recordings, Maya replied. It was the voice of Ethan Ward. The room froze. Alexander's breath left him in a shaking exhale, as though someone had ripped open old wounds and poured fire inside. Kane shot forward in rage. That's impossible. Ethan Ward is missing. Likely fleeing the country. And even if he were present, suggesting involvement without proof is slander. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I know what I heard, she said. I wrote down the exact words. She pulled her small leather notebook from her bag and handed it to Judge Harrington, who flipped through its pages carefully. The handwriting was neat and organized, dated with precise timestamps. The page she opened to read. We need read out of the picture before the acquisition goes public. Once the conviction is sealed, investors will move. We'll control everything. Relax. His own lawyer will walk. The story's already written. The judge's jaw tightened. Your Honor, Kane protested, voice cracking under strain, this could be fabricated. She has every reason to lie. Why would she? Alexander's voice cut through the room like steel. She gains nothing. No money. No status. No protection. Yet she's risking her job, her safety, everything. He turned toward Maya. Why are you doing this? Silence fell like snowfall, soft, slow, heavy. Maya lifted her eyes, and the world seemed to narrow to a single fragile thread between 2 broken people. Because someone has to, she said. Because I know what it's like to watch justice die and do nothing. I won't let that happen again. Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a mixture of grief, gratitude, and a spark of fight returning to his chest. Judge Harrington closed the notebook and folded her hands. Miss Lawson, she said slowly, if you agree to testify under oath, the court will not disregard your statement. However, if your claims prove false, you will face charges of perjury and obstruction. Do you understand the risk? Yes, Maya answered without hesitation. Kane slammed his palm on the table. This is madness, Your Honor. You're willing to derail the prosecution because of a janitor's scribbled notes? Harrington fixed him with a cold, sharpened stare. Mr. Kane, justice does not discriminate by profession. And neither will this court. The prosecutor fell silent, jaw clenched. The judge nodded to her clerk. Schedule an emergency evidentiary hearing. Miss Lawson will provide sworn testimony tomorrow morning. The decision echoed through the room like a thunderclap. Court would resume under a new war. As they exited the chambers, Alexander walked beside Maya, silent for several steps. The hallway was empty, no reporters, no spectators, just the hollow sound of their footsteps. Finally, he spoke. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Maya replied softly, I did. He looked at her, searching for understanding. What are they after? Why frame me? Why burn everything I built? Maya hesitated, her voice careful, deliberate. Someone wants full control of Novacor. Your company isn't just profitable, it sits at the center of national infrastructure. Whoever controls it controls cities, governments, energy networks, data lines. That kind of power doesn't come from stock shares or public elections. It comes from ownership. Alexander's pulse hammered. You think the prosecution is involved? I think someone is pulling strings, she said. Someone with influence big enough to buy silence, loyalty, even legal outcomes. He swallowed hard. And Ethan? The name felt like acid in his throat. I think he sold you out, Maya answered quietly. And I think he wasn't acting alone. Alexander stopped walking. For the first time, his voice cracked. I trusted him. I loved him like a brother. I gave him everything. Maya's heart tightened in her chest. Most betrayal comes from the people closest to us, she whispered. Strangers can't break you the way family can. Alexander bowed his head, eyes burning. Why are you helping me? He asked again, voice raw. You don't even know me. Maya exhaled, revealing a truth she rarely allowed to surface. Because I lost someone too, she said. Someone who died because nobody cared to help. I can't change the past, but maybe I can change this. Alexander looked at her, really looked. And something in his eyes changed. Not pity. Not desperation. Respect. They walked outside through the service exit to avoid the press. Rain misted the air like cold breath. A black sedan sat idling at the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Sir, he said. I'll walk home, Alexander replied, surprising even himself. I'll join you, Maya said. He nodded. And together, they walked down the slick sidewalk under a gray sky bruised with storm clouds. Halfway down the block, a black SUV turned the corner sharply, tires screeching. The windows were tinted dark, too dark. The vehicle slowed beside them, rolling close enough that Maya felt the air shift. Alexander stiffened. The window lowered 2 inches. A voice hissed from inside, low, threatening, venomous. Stop digging, Miss Lawson. Walk away, or you'll disappear like the others. Before they could react, the SUV roared away, fishtailing water across the street. Maya stood frozen, her heartbeat pounding so hard it shook her bones. Alexander turned to her, eyes wide. Maya, you're in danger now. She swallowed, fear tightening around her chest like iron. I know, she whispered. He stepped closer, voice firm. Then you're not walking anywhere alone. Lightning split the sky above them. War had officially begun. And there was no turning back. The night air held the kind of stillness that feels unnatural, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Tall buildings rose like dark sentinels on both sides of the narrow street where Maya and Alexander walked, keeping low, eyes scanning the shadows. After the black SUV's threat earlier, every quiet moment felt like it was waiting to explode. They had spent hours in a safe location with Alexander's legal advisor, the only one left who hadn't been bought or frightened into silence, gathering everything Maya had collected. Names. Patterns. Recordings. And the beginnings of a truth too dangerous for daylight. Now, in the late hours of night, they were on their way to a place Alexander hadn't visited in months, his former headquarters, Novacor Tower. It feels different, he murmured as the towering skyscraper came into view, glowing coldly against the sky. It should, Maya said, her voice low. You're no longer welcome inside the empire you built. Security guards now wore new black uniforms. The logo had been subtly altered, the original sleek silver had been replaced with a darker, heavier design. Small changes that whispered ownership. He clenched his fists. They've already taken it. Maya touched his arm, grounding him. You'll take it back. As they approached the service entrance, Alexander stopped. Are you sure you want to do this? It's one thing to testify, but going in there? That's war. Maya inhaled deeply. War has already come to us. She pushed the door open. Inside, the building felt emptier than it should. Silent hallways. Locked offices. Security cameras that tracked movement with chilling precision. This way, Alexander whispered, leading her to the executive elevator. He still remembered the passcode, muscle memory from a better life. The doors opened with a soft ding as though welcoming him home. But the ride up was suffocating. Maya noticed him shaking. You okay? He nodded, eyes distant. It's just, the last time I was here, I still believed I had a future. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. Floor 62. The top. Alexander's office. The doors didn't swing open proudly, they hissed open like the mouth of something waiting to consume. Inside, the room was not how he left it. Furniture rearranged. Files gone. Personal photos removed. The boardroom screens displayed encrypted interfaces he didn't recognize. Someone scrubbed this place clean, Alexander whispered, fury rising under his skin. Maya moved toward the desk. Look. A glass panel beneath the varnished wood glowed faintly. She pressed her palm to the surface. A hidden interface awakened, a remnant of Alexander's personal system no one else knew about. It survived, he breathed. Lines of code surfaced, red flags marking abnormal transfers. Maya's eyes widened. All these accounts lead back to one entity. She tapped the screen. A name appeared. Ward Industries Consortium. Alexander froze. That's not real. Ethan doesn't own a consortium. He couldn't. Maya clicked again. News articles popped up. Breaking, Ethan Ward appointed interim CEO of Novacor. Ward announces global expansion plan following Reed scandal. Billionaire visionary, Ethan Ward named Businessman of the Year nominee. Alexander's breath shook violently. He planned this for years. Maya swallowed hard. And he didn't do it alone. She tapped one more link, and what surfaced made Alexander stumble backward. A corporate partnership announcement. Marcus Kane, Chief Legal Advisor, Ward Industries. The prosecutor himself. The man trying to bury Alexander was now part of the empire he was stealing. It was a conspiracy of two men he trusted most. The brother he loved. The law he believed in. They hadn't framed him for money. Not just for power. But to erase him. Completely. Alexander's voice cracked. He took my life. Maya placed a hand over his. And we just found the weapon to take it back. Before they could move, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out. The entire floor plunged into darkness. Maya's pulse spiked. They know we're here. Alexander grabbed her arm. We need to move. Now. Emergency lights glowed a dim red along the floor edges as footsteps echoed from the hallway, not hurried, but calm, confident. Predatory. Maya darted behind a pillar, pulling Alexander down with her. 3 men appeared, dressed in black tactical suits, armored vests, guns drawn. Not security. Killers. One of them spoke into a radio. They're still on this floor. Orders? A distorted voice crackled through. No hesitation. No witnesses. Alexander's breath grew ragged. Maya whispered, we need a distraction. He nodded and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small silver security chip. What is that? One of the last things I hid before the raid. Emergency override. He tossed it toward the opposite side of the room. When it hit the floor, every alarm in the building erupted, blaring sirens, security doors slamming shut, sprinklers firing mist into the air like smoke. The armed men turned sharply toward the sound. Maya seized the opportunity, pulling Alexander across the room toward a side staircase. They ran. Shots fired behind them, bullets splintering the glass table they'd crouched behind seconds earlier. Alexander grabbed the stairwell handle, locked. No, 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 no. Maya slammed her shoulder into it, eyes wild. Move. Together, they threw their weight against the door. It burst open, and they stumbled inside. They bounded down the steps, breath sharp and loud. Maya, he gasped. She slowed just enough to look at him. What? He grabbed her shoulders, eyes fierce and terrified. You could die. Because of me. She shook her head, no fear, only resolve. I'd rather die fighting for the truth than live invisible in a world built on lies. He had no words. But something unspoken surged between them. Not romance. Not yet. But bond. Unbreakable. By the time they slipped out through the underground exit and into the damp alley beside the tower, the city felt alive again. Cars passing, distant sirens, a world unaware of the battlefield in its heart. Alexander leaned against a wall, catching his breath. "You saved my life," he said. Maya looked at him, expression softening. "You saved mine first. When you believed me." He opened his mouth, then stopped, unsure how to voice the weight of what he felt. So she continued. "We have proof now. Evidence tied to them both. We expose Marcus Kane, and Ethan falls with him." Alexander stared at the towering glass building, rain soaking his hair, suit, shoes, but he didn't care. "They took everything I had," he whispered. Maya stepped beside him. "And now we'll take everything back." Lightning flashed, a long white vein across a dark sky. But when thunder followed, it wasn't alone. Another sound cut through the night. Clacking footsteps, deliberate and approaching. Alexander and Maya turned. A figure stepped forward from the shadows, an expensive coat, slicked hair, a smile sharper than broken glass. Ethan Ward. "So touching," he drawled. "The fallen king and his little janitor knight." Alexander's blood ran to ice. Ethan lifted a gun and aimed it at Maya's chest. "You should have stayed invisible." Maya froze, eyes locked with a man who murdered futures with a pen and now wanted to finish the job with a bullet. Alexander stepped forward instinctively, shielding her. Ethan smirked. "Oh, Alex, still protecting the weak? That's why you lost." He cocked the gun. The world held its breath. Then, "Drop the weapon." A voice roared from behind them. Uniformed officers flooded the alley, weapons drawn. Someone had called the police. For the first time, fear flickered in Ethan's eyes. He stepped back, then bolted down the opposite alley. After him, an officer shouted. The police sprinted after Ethan, boots splashing water, radios crackling chaos. Maya and Alexander stood alone again, breathless, trembling, but alive. He turned to her slowly. "Maya." She lifted her chin, exhausted, but unbroken. "This isn't over," she said. "No," he agreed. "This is only the beginning." He looked toward the direction Ethan vanished, the shadows where betrayal still slithered. For the first time, Alexander whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." Maya nodded. "Good," she said. "Because tomorrow, we fight." The echo of the judge's gavel still quivered through courtroom 3 like distant thunder fading into silence. The air felt heavy enough to crush lungs, and for several seconds, no one dared to move or breathe. Journalists leaned forward with cameras raised like rifles. Spectators held their breath. The prosecution waited like wolves ready to pounce. But all eyes were fixed on Maya Lawson, standing at the center of the courtroom, trembling slightly but refusing to fall. A maid. A nobody. A woman who should have remained invisible. Yet she stood like a pillar against a storm that had already destroyed stronger men. Judge Harrison's face was carved into an expression of tense control. His fingers tapped the bench slowly, a silent warning that he was seconds away from shutting the scene down. "Miss Lawson," the judge said, his voice sharp and deliberate, "you understand that what you just declared is highly irregular?" "Yes, Your Honor," Maya answered, forcing strength into her voice. "I understand exactly where I am and what I'm asking." "And you still intend to speak on behalf of the defendant? Despite having no legal standing?" "Yes," she replied. "Because truth doesn't require a license." A wave of noise broke across the courtroom, laughter, scoffs, gasps, angry shouts. People pointed at her as if she were a spectacle for their entertainment. The prosecutor, Daniel Keaton, stepped forward smiling with the confidence of a man who believed the battle was already won. "Your Honor, this is absurd," he said. This young woman cleans floors and empties trash. She's here to serve refreshments, not legal arguments. We cannot allow a courtroom to become a stage for theatrics. Snickers erupted behind him. But Maya held the judge's gaze unwaveringly. Your Honor, she said quietly but powerfully, if truth can only be spoken by those wealthy enough to afford it, then justice has already failed. The courtroom fell silent, an eerie, stunned quiet. Something about her words sliced through arrogance like a blade. The judge inhaled deeply, weighing more than legality, perhaps morality. You have 5 minutes, he finally said. Not a second more. Use them wisely. The courtroom exploded with sound, reporters shouting questions, spectators turning wild, camera shutters firing like rapid gunshots. Alexander closed his eyes and exhaled a shaky breath, disbelief mixing with desperation. Maya stepped closer to the defense table. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. My name is Maya Lawson, she began. You don't know me. You've passed me hundreds of times without ever seeing me. I clean your chairs and sweep your floors. And while you talked over me and ignored me, I listened. She turned toward the jury. I listened when you whispered about this case. I listened when the prosecution rehearsed arguments in empty rooms. And I listened when Victor Hale, the CFO of Reed Corporation, made late-night phone calls arranging for the evidence that framed Alexander Reed. Gasps rippled through the benches. Objection. Keaton snapped. This is slander from a delusional. Sit down, Mr. Keaton, the judge growled. It was the first time his composure cracked. Maya continued. 3 nights ago, I was cleaning Mr. Hale's private office. I found shredded financial documents in his bin, documents showing wire transfers to offshore accounts. I took them home and reconstructed them, piece by piece. She reached inside her uniform and removed a sealed envelope. These papers show that Victor Hale transferred the missing funds, and planned the collapse of Reed Corporation to take control after Alexander's conviction. The judge motioned to the bailiff. When the envelope reached him and he opened it, the courtroom leaned forward collectively like a single living body suffocating for air. His eyes widened. His face paled. His fist tightened around the papers. He lifted his gaze, slowly, toward Keaton. Then toward Victor Hale seated behind the prosecutor's table. Mr. Hale, the judge said, voice dangerously level, approached the bench. Victor stood rigid, eyes darting rapidly. Sweat drenched his collar. For the first time, his mask cracked. I don't know what she's talking about, he stammered. Those could be forged, she's lying. Approach the bench, the judge repeated, each word a hammer. 2 officers stepped forward. Victor panicked. He bolted. The courtroom exploded into chaos, shouts, screams, cameras whipping in every direction. Chairs scraped aggressively across the floor. Officers launched after him, tackling him against the exit door. Papers flew. A reporter caught the moment on camera with brutal clarity. Alexander rose instinctively, hands gripping the rail. Maya stood frozen, breath shallow. You're making a mistake. Victor shrieked, fighting wildly. She's lying. She's nothing, she's a maid. Those words ignited something primal in the room, anger, disgust, awakening. Maya stepped forward slowly, voice trembling but unbreakable. Yes, she said, I'm a maid. But I am also a witness. And unlike you, I'm not afraid of the truth. The judge slammed the gavel repeatedly. Order. Order. The noise fell back into a ragged hush. Judge Harrison looked at Maya, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Miss Lawson, he said, softer now, do you understand that if these documents are legitimate, they change everything about this case? I do, she whispered. And if they are not, your actions could put you in prison. I know, she said. And I did it anyway. The judge's expression shifted, a flicker of respect. Court will recess until tomorrow morning, he announced. Mr. Hale is to be taken into custody for immediate questioning. The defendant will remain in holding until formal review of this evidence. He turned to Maya. And Miss Lawson, you are not to leave the city. You will be called to the stand tomorrow. Maya nodded and stepped back, her breath breaking into uneven gasps. The pressure in the room loosened just enough for her knees to tremble. Alexander was being led away in handcuffs when he turned to her, eyes full of raw emotion. Why, he whispered. Why risk everything for me? She met his eyes, soft but unyielding. Because someone once stood for me when everyone else walked away, she said. And I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to do the same, I would not run. The guard pulled him through the door, but his eyes never left hers. Reporters swarmed her instantly, microphones shoved into her face like weapons. Who are you really? How did you get those documents? Do you have a legal background? Why defend him? Are you in love with him? Maya looked straight ahead, expression unreadable. I will speak tomorrow, she said. In court. Where truth belongs. And she walked out of the courtroom as the world watched in stunned silence. Not as a maid. Not as background scenery. But as the woman who just set fire to an empire built on lies. Because tomorrow, the war would begin. Night fell heavy over the city, wrapping everything in a cold steel darkness that felt alive, breathing, watching, waiting. Rain hammered against the courthouse steps, washing away the footsteps and chaos left behind hours earlier. The world outside seemed restless, impatient, as if it already sensed that tomorrow would not just be another day, but a reckoning. Inside the courthouse lobby, the last lights flickered out one by one until only a dim glow remained above the security desk. Cleaning crews finished their work. Guards clocked out. The building slowly emptied, leaving behind silence thick enough to carry echoes. And in the middle of that silence stood Maya Lawson, still wearing the same uniform she had worn that morning, the sleeves damp with sweat, the knees dirty from where she had knelt to gather the shredded papers that changed everything. Her hair was coming loose from its bun, rain stuck to her eyelashes, and her hands still trembled no matter how tightly she clasped them. She waited alone near the glass doors, watching the rain streak down like tears on a mirror. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Maya? Alexander's voice was low and rough, strained through the static of a prison phone line, but unmistakably gentle underneath. I wasn't sure they would let this call through. Hearing his voice loosened something deep inside her chest, something she had held together with threads all day. They gave me 5 minutes, she whispered. Just like the judge did. Silence stretched between them, not empty, but full of unspoken things neither yet knew how to say. Are you all right? Alexander asked. Maya swallowed hard. I don't know. I think so. Today was more than I expected. I know, he murmured. I never wanted this to fall on you. You shouldn't be carrying this weight. But I am, she said quietly. And I chose to. Another silence. Rain struck harder against the glass like thousands of fingertips demanding entry. Why? He asked again. But this time it wasn't confusion, it was emotion, thick and raw. Why would you risk your life, your name, everything, for someone who's nothing to you? Maya closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against the glass. Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned when you need someone the most, she whispered. When I was 23, my mother got sick, cancer. We lost everything trying to keep her alive. We lived in a shelter for 6 months. Nobody cared. Nobody helped. We were invisible. And one day, a lawyer who barely knew us fought against the insurance company that rejected her treatment. Her breath shook. She died anyway. But he stayed. He fought when no one else would. And I promised myself that if I ever saw someone drowning the way we drowned, I wouldn't walk away. Silence fell, heavy and sacred. Alexander exhaled shakily on the other end. You remind me, he said, voice cracking, that there is still goodness in this world. Maya stared out at the dark street, watching headlights blur through the downpour. What happens tomorrow will decide everything, she said. Keaton will come for me harder. The media won't stop. Victor has lawyers and money and power. They will try to destroy my reputation. They know I'm the only loose thread that can unravel their plan. You shouldn't face this alone, Alexander said urgently. You need protection, legal counsel, someone to stand beside you. I don't have anyone, she said softly. You have me, he replied immediately. Not hesitant. Not unsure. A declaration. She closed her eyes again. For the first time in years, she felt seen. But the warmth of that moment shattered with the sudden vibration of another phone, this time from her bag. Threat texts. Dozens. Screenshots, insults, warnings, curses flashing one after another. You think you're a hero? You're dead tomorrow. Stay silent or disappear. We know where you live. Her stomach twisted. Her hands turned cold. Maya? Alexander's voice sharpened. What's happening? Nothing, she lied, stuffing the phone back into the bag. It's fine. But he heard the tremor in her breath. Listen to me, he said. If things get dangerous, walk away. No one will blame you. I would, she whispered. Another silence. This one hurt. I need you to promise me something, he said. What? If tomorrow goes wrong, don't lose yourself trying to save me. She shook her head even though he couldn't see. I already lost too much in the past, she said. I won't lose myself now. Not when I finally have a chance to do something that matters. The line clicked, the call was cut. Maya stood motionless, staring at the dead phone in her hand. Then she gathered her bag and walked out into the storm. The city turns against her. By the next morning, Maya's face was everywhere. News channels looped the footage of her shouting, I will defend him, as if it were a joke. Commentators dissected her like she was an exhibit. Breaking news, janitor claims to represent Billionaire in courtroom meltdown. Is this a stunt? Delusion? Or something sinister? Online mobs tore her apart. Uneducated attention seeker. Crazy maid. Gold-digging liar. She's doing it for fame. She's sleeping with him. Her hands shook as she scrolled, then she shut the phone off completely. She stepped outside her apartment building and froze. Crowds were waiting, reporters, protesters, people screaming in her face. Microphones shoved against her cheeks. Cameras inches away. You're not a lawyer. You're a fraud. He's guilty and so are you. Show us your qualifications. Are you using him for money? A woman spat near her feet. Someone threw a crumpled cup that bounced off her shoulder. A man shouted, Go back where you belong. Maya kept walking. One step. Then another. Around the corner, a black SUV slowed beside her. The tinted window slid down to reveal Daniel Keaton, grinning like a wolf. Rough morning, Miss Lawson, he said. You could make this all disappear. Take the bribe, disappear quietly, and stop embarrassing yourself. You don't belong on that courtroom floor. Maya stared at him without blinking. You're afraid, she said. His smile faded. No, he said. I'm disgusted. You should be, she replied. But not by me. The window rolled up. The car sped away. Maya reached the courthouse steps alone, rain still falling. Reporters swarmed her like piranhas. Flash after flash burned against her retinas. But she kept walking. Through the doors. Down the hall. Toward courtroom 3. She opened the door and stepped inside. Alexander, handcuffed, exhausted, but alive, lifted his head the moment he heard the door. Their eyes met. Everything else disappeared. The judge entered. The gavel struck. Court is now back in session, Judge Harrison announced. Today, we resume proceedings in the matter of State versus Alexander Reed. The battle that would determine everything was about to begin. And Maya Lawson, once invisible, stood ready to go to war. Because tomorrow was not promised. But courage does not wait for permission. And she was no longer alone. The courtroom was suffocating with tension, every seat was filled, the air buzzing with whispers and judgment. Spectators leaned forward like predators waiting for blood. Journalists typed furiously, cameras poised to capture every flinch, every tear, every defeat. Maya stood at the defense table, hands clasped tightly in front of her to hide the shaking. She could feel her pulse pounding in her throat, hear the echo of her heartbeat like war drums. Across from her sat prosecutor Daniel Keaton, polished like steel, smiling with venom behind perfect teeth. Next to him, Victor Hale, the man who once called Alexander his friend, sat confident, smug, certain that power always won. The judge adjusted his glasses. Before we continue with opening statements. Miss Lawson, I must ask again. You are not a licensed attorney. On what grounds do you believe you have standing to speak in this courtroom? A long silence followed. All eyes turned to her. Maya inhaled, slowly, deliberately, and stepped forward. I don't stand here as a lawyer, Your Honor, she said, voice steady though her hands trembled. I stand here as truth's last witness. And as a citizen of this country. I have the right to present evidence of a crime that has been suppressed and buried by people with power. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Keaton rose, furious. Your Honor, this is absurd. We cannot allow this circus to continue. This woman is unqualified. The judge lifted a hand. Mr. Keaton. You will let her speak. Maya reached into her bag and placed a thick folder onto the defense table. The same papers she had rescued from the shredded pile, now taped together with care and precision. These documents, she said, are financial ledgers and private correspondence proving that Victor Hale transferred company funds into illegal offshore accounts, then framed Alexander Reed to protect himself. The room roared. Reporters scrambled. Cameras flashed. Keaton slammed his hand on the table. Ridiculous. That so-called evidence is stolen property. Unlawfully obtained. Unlawfully destroyed, Maya shot back. Which would have erased the truth forever if I hadn't acted. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Keaton, is this evidence authentic? Keaton froze, face draining of color. Victor the billionaire leaned in, whispering harshly, handle it. Keaton straightened. Your Honor, we must object to this presentation. But before he could finish, the courtroom doors burst open. A group of attorneys stormed in, led by Eleanor Sharp, a high-profile defense lawyer known for dismantling corrupt prosecutions. Cameras exploded at the sight of her. Your Honor, she announced loudly. I am filing an emergency motion to represent Mr. Reed. Miss Lawson contacted my office last night and provided a compelling preliminary briefing. We have independently verified the legitimacy of these documents. She placed a sealed envelope in front of the judge. And we have copies of emails and audio recordings tying Victor Hale to witness bribery and evidence tampering. Chaos erupted. Keaton turned white. Victor's jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The judge pounded the gavel. Order. Order. Silence returned in broken pieces. He turned to Maya. Miss Lawson, because of your actions, this court now possesses critical evidence previously withheld. The law may not recognize you as counsel, but history will recognize your courage. He looked to the bailiff. Uncuff Mr. Reed. The sound of chains falling to the floor echoed like thunder. Alexander rose slowly, muscles stiff, eyes shining with something that looked like disbelief, and something deeper. Freedom. The judge faced the gallery. Based on the evidence presented, all charges against Mr. Reed are hereby dismissed. A warrant is issued for the immediate arrest of Victor Hale on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Gasps. Screams. Reporters surged to their feet. Victor bolted for the exit, shoving chairs aside, but marshals tackled him before he could make it 3 steps. The courtroom erupted into shouting. Eleanor leaned toward Maya. You just changed the entire landscape of this city. Don't disappear after today. The world needs people like you. But Maya wasn't listening anymore. Because Alexander was standing in front of her. Free. Human. Alive. He looked at her like she was the sun after a lifetime underground. You saved me, he said quietly. She shook her head. Tears filled her eyes. No. I just refuse to let them bury you. He touched her hands gently, his voice breaking. You gave me a future when I thought I'd already lost it. Reporters rushed in, cameras blinding, microphones thrust toward them. Miss Lawson, will you speak to your supporters? How does it feel to be a hero? What's next for you and Mr. Reed? Are you two in a relationship? Maya froze, overwhelmed by noise, lights, hands pulling, voices demanding. Alexander stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. Back up, he said firmly. She's done enough. She deserves peace. Security moved in, clearing the crowd. As they walked out into the bright sunlight, no longer rain, no longer darkness, people outside cheered, not protested. They lifted signs that said thank you Maya and Justice won. Strangers clapped. Some cried. Some reached out just to touch her hand. For the first time in her life, Maya Lawson wasn't invisible. She stopped at the courthouse steps and looked out over the crowd, her breath shaking. Alexander turned to her. So, he said softly. What happens now? She let out a trembling laugh. I have no idea. He smiled. Not the polished smile of a billionaire. A real one. Tired. Grateful. Human. Whatever comes next, he said, I hope we face it together. Maya met his eyes. Together, she whispered. They stepped down the stairs, side by side, into the light of a world forever changed. 1 year later. Morning sun pours into a sleek glass office high above the city skyline. On the door, engraved in silver, 4 words. Lawson and Reed Foundation. Justice belongs to everyone. Inside, volunteers work tirelessly, helping people who cannot afford legal defense. Walls are covered in thank you letters, newspaper headlines, lives changed forever. In the boardroom, Maya reviews case files. Alexander sets 2 cups of coffee beside her. He looks at her with quiet admiration and says, You built something incredible. Maya smiles, calm and steady. No, she says. We built it. Then, Alexander places a small velvet box on the table. His voice trembles. Maya. I don't know what I would have become without you. But if you'll let me, I want to walk the rest of my life with you. Silence. Her breath catches. Tears rise. She opens the box. A simple silver ring, pure and honest. She looks into his eyes and whispers 1 word. Yes. Applause breaks out from the hallway. They embrace. And beyond the window, the world outside glows with new light. Not because justice is perfect, but because someone finally fought for it. And as the world turned the page, one truth echoed louder than any verdict. Courage isn't born in power. It's born in the overlooked. The underestimated. The broken. In those who stand even when their knees shake. Maya Lawson wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't protected. She was a maid, a woman they expected to remain silent. But when the world turned its back, she stepped forward. When justice was strangled by power and corruption, she breathed life back into it. When darkness tried to bury the truth, she struck a match and burned the darkness away. Her voice shook, but she still spoke. Her hands trembled, but she still fought. Her past scarred her, but it never stopped her. Because bravery isn't fearlessness. Bravery is fighting while afraid. Underscore 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 underscore. So let me ask you. If a woman with nothing could change everything, what excuse does the rest of the world have? If Maya Lawson proved that ordinary people can rewrite destiny, doesn't her courage deserve to be seen? If you believe Maya is the definition of strength, if you believe heroes are made, not born, if you believe truth will always rise, then show it. Hit like. Subscribe for more real justice stories. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their voice matters. Because right now, somewhere out there, someone is standing on the edge of silence, waiting for a reason to speak. And maybe, just maybe, Maya Lawson is that reason. Dark Chronicle. Where truth is fierce. Where justice is earned. Where ordinary people become legends. See you in the next story.